Okay, I started the recording right now again. So yeah, I'll share the recording as well. We've seen the overview of the market analysis portal. So I'll go straight to our trade map. I was looking at the different tabs. This is the home page. So this is the page where you always want to come back to in case you have some technical issues here as well. You can always count on home and search. I will turn off my camera just in case people, okay. Here we have a tab which is called the Data Availability tab, and it's good to know which products are already available, which countries' data are already available or not. If you're interested, for example, I can click on it and you can see that we are now working on adding the latest data for 2020, which is already available for 30% of global trade, but we're actively working on having this up and running as soon as possible. But you can see that for some countries, there's some yellow areas, which is not that data is not available, but this is mirror data because Albania, for example, might not have reported its 2019 data, but we have been able to reconstruct its data by taking Albania's partner countries and using that data as a mirror statistics for, so we could, it's an idea, it's not exact, but at least we have a good idea of what happened with Albanian trade. So if you ever see data in yellow, you know that this is data that has been reconstructed using its partner countries' data. You have reference material here at the top as well, which is very interesting. For example, the frequently asked questions can answer many questions you might have. There's a user guide on how to go through the different tables. There's a glossary if you don't find specific words, if you want to refresh your memory. This one is also a very important one because products in Trade Map and in all our market analysis tools, they get a harmonized systems code. And this harmonized system code is a code that is internationally recognized and used by the World Customs Union and organization. And this will allow you to do cross-country analysis. And this it's important that your harmonized system codes are defined correctly to be able to see what is happening for your country, for your product. And as this harmonized system code has some revisions every 5 years, in 2017 there was the last revision, the next one will be in 2022. These codes sometimes shift a little bit over time, so it's important that you know what happened to your code over time. And this correspondence table shows you if anything happened during a last revision. Here we have another tab which goes to other ITC tools. Market access map, for example, is the one we will see later. Export potential map is the one that we will see later. And then we have many others. And here we have a tab to the portal that we were at just now. So this is our entire suite as of now. And then you have other information, for example, the details of the subscription fees, the terms and conditions, some of our definitions on developing countries and territories. You can find a newsletter with the latest developments in our section. You can find the survey, which most of you have replied to last year. You find some video tutorials, which is actually also, if you want some more information after this, you can find very detailed tutorials on Trade Map, but also on Market Access Map and on Export Potential Map through our YouTube channel. And you can access it through this tab as well. I think you have an idea of how our site is structured right now. So I'm going back to the home page, and the first thing you need to do is log in with your credentials. Here you see mine. I'm gonna remember it. Login. It asks you if we are human. Yes, we are. And we are back at our home screen. So there's many different tabs. So let's go over them one by one. We want to look at a product. So we want to look into trading products. We want to look at the exports. And for this example, I want to look into the exports of green tea. So I type in green tea, and very easily I find the things that I'm looking for. So you have green tea in immediate packagings of less than 3 kilos or more than 3 kilos. But it's not always as easy as this. For example, if I want to look at beans, you get a huge list of many, many different codes. And it's very hard to figure out which code actually corresponds to what I'm looking for. So in this case, it's much less obvious. And this list is also not exhaustive. So this list is only the top 50 results of what beans could be. So in this case, you go to advanced search if you don't find your product code by just entering it. And you can search by keywords. So in this case, let me look for beans. And I find the same list of many beans, but at least now we can read the whole description. We can see locust beans, dried shelled beans. And interesting to know is if you click on this code, it will rank them according to the codes. So you can actually see that similar types of products are now closer together, because these codes, 07, for example, it just means very simple beans, raw beans, or fresh or chilled beans. So the higher the code goes, the more sophisticated the products are. So it can be, in this case, it's still cocoa beans, but if you go even further, it can be preparations with beans. It can be some seeds or animal feed, or it can be many things. But if you want to look into just the very agricultural product of it, it's mostly starting with a 0. So here we want to look into this type of beans, for example. You click on it and you find it, it automatically fills itself out here in the search box. I see that there are some chats. I want to remind you at this point to just put your questions here in the chat, and I will get back to them after the trade map session. So, sorry, okay. So we look into exports of beans. Okay, let me go back to my green tea because that's the example I want to work with. One other thing, you can see that these codes are 6 digits. This is the most detailed level for this internationally recognized code. So you will not find an HSS, an harmonized system code of 8 digits, for example. You can find codes with 2 digits, which is the less digits, the more generic the product description would be. So for example, if this HS6 code belongs to a 09 HS2 code. This is the more detailed level of an HS2 code. So 09 is probably coffee and tea. So, and then you go more into detail and it becomes 0902, which means tea. And then you go more into detail, which is 6 digits, and you find green tea in immediate packagings of more than 3 kilos. So that's how this harmonized system code works. once you have more than 6 digits, it's not internationally recognized anymore, but then it becomes a country-specific code, which is a code that is used by the customs on the ground. So it's important for example, when you're looking into tariffs, then it's important that you know what is the specific country code of the country you are targeting. But for international analysis at this point, this is not, we will look into this later, but this is not important yet. So let me go back quickly. We have different buttons here. The trade indicators are the ones that we calculate using the trade data. So it gives you more information on very specific things. We give some extra information. But if you want to look at the raw data, you can find yearly time series. So per country, you find the list of imported green tea. You can find quarterly data, monthly data, and some companies, but we will come back to this. At this point, I just want to look at the trade indicators. So this is a very big table. I am going to zoom in a little bit in case some people are looking at this session on a smaller screen. Okay, so here at the top, you find a little box, and this should actually reflect everything that you have filled out on the home page. So here you can see that we selected the 090220 green tea of more than 3 kilos, so that's perfect. We want to look at all the countries, and we want to look at exports. We clicked on trade indicators, and at this point, this is an extra option, but you can look at by product or by country. I always do this to make sure that I'm looking at the right table. I read this the title. So I'm looking at the list of exporters for the selected product in 2019, which is the latest year available at this point. And we are looking at green tea of more than 3 kilos, so correct. And here you have the standard table. All our tables look a little bit alike, and they are structured in a very similar way. So once you understand how the tables work, it's very interesting to play with them and to look further into specific details. Here at the beginning, you see the list of the exporters, and they are ranked according to the value that they exported in 2019. So China was the largest exporter of green tea in packagings of larger than 3 kilos. Vietnam was the second, Japan third, Germany, you understand the system. And it is ranked according to this second column right here, the value exported in 2019. Here, the first line in purple is always the global exports of the product. So in total, in 2019, there was more than 1 billion US dollars in exports on a global level. It's important that you keep in mind that it's US dollar thousands. So you, this is 1,086,320,000 US dollars. So it's important to keep in mind when you look at values in trade map, it's always in 1,000 US dollars. The second row is the trade balance. So this shows you whether a specific country is importing or exporting more of a product. For example, here, the trade balance is calculated by exports minus imports. So China exported 702,480,000. So we can assume that it imported something like 20 million based on this trade balance. So it's interesting to see if these countries re-export maybe this green tea or they import more of a specific product than they export. The fourth column at this point, we see the quantity exported in 2019. So this is also interesting to see. Most of the time, this is in tons, but that next column tells you in which quantity unit this is actually calculated. In this case, it's tons. So we can see that there was 296,291 tons exported in 2019. So these two are actually linked to each other, because on one hand you have the value exported, and on the other hand you have the quantity exported. And this is interesting because it can actually give you an idea of the unit value that was of the product for these countries. So for example, China had a 3.72 US dollars per tons of green tea. When you look at Japan, this is much higher. So this is an interesting number, but at the same time, it's an important number to keep in mind that this is not a price, because as we talked about these, the product codes, these codes are not on a very detailed level. So there might be very different types of product underneath this, this code. So this is only a unit value, and it's the average over the whole year. It doesn't take into account different market shocks. It doesn't take into account that maybe the Japanese green tea is of a totally different quality. It can be that there's different types of packagings, because some stuff might be packaged in 4 kilos, but then other packages might be in 20 kilos. We don't know anything about this, so it's important to keep in mind that this is not a price. It's an indicator of how the unit value can have changed over time. You can compare them across countries and maybe try to figure out why the one in Japan is much higher than from Vietnam, but this is not information that we can detract from this table. It's something we have to do more research about to be able to understand. But nonetheless, I think it's a very interesting thing. And if you look at the unit value over time, you can figure out if your product in general is becoming more expensive compared to previous years, or is declining in value. The next three columns are actually about growth and how these exporters are performing in the past few years. So the first of these columns, of those three columns, is the annual growth in value between 2015 and 2019. So it's the growth over 5 years. So it's interesting to see, without taking too many changes and short-term shocks into account, what happened over these 5 years. So you can see that in the world, green tea has been growing very steadily, very fast, actually, at 12% per year on average. So this is very high. Then on the second column, we can see that every year the growth in quantity has been also steadily growing, but much lower, at 5%, which is also still very well. This market is growing very strongly, but slower than the value. So we can also see if the value grows faster than the actual quantity that's being exported, we can say that green tea is becoming more valued in the global market. So we can say that it's becoming more expensive, even though we don't see the price here. As I mentioned, we can say that the value of the product is becoming much higher over time. And the third growth column shows you the growth over just 1 year. So between 2018 and 2019, the growth in value of green tea has been growing at 9%. So this is interesting to see For example, if on average over 5 years, a product is growing at 12%, but it is growing at maybe 0% in the last year only, we can say that it's a very volatile product. Like if that happens in one specific market, for example, we see in Germany that the growth over 5 years has been very stagnant, it's been very stable, but in the last year it went down with -9%. So we might say that this is not the most dynamic market to be targeting if we don't have any foot in this market yet. So it's important to keep measuring these things against each other to see what is actually interesting, because 12% on its own is actually a very good number. 1% stagnant market sounds very stable as well, but then -9%, we have to look into what happened in that year to be understanding why it has gone down in such a short period of time compared to the stable number otherwise. It's also interesting if you look into, for example, Japan. It's growing at 19%, which is higher than the global average exports of green tea. So we can say that Japan is growing faster. It's growing its exports of green tea faster than the world average exports of green tea. So Japan is gaining market share. Whereas Vietnam, for example, it's still growing well, but it's growing less fast than global average exports. So Vietnam is at this point losing market share in the global market of green tea. So it's interesting to always benchmark the country numbers to the global numbers as well. Then some more indicators here. We can see that we also have an indicator which is share in world exports. So yeah, the world is always 100% share, but then we see that, for example, China has 64.7% of the world exports of green tea in hand. So it's huge. It's a very concentrated exports distribution. And it's followed by 12.4% for Vietnam, and Japan is 6.2% of the market share. So even though Vietnam is losing a little bit here, we can see that it still has, it's the second largest exporter and keeps 12.4% of world exports. So it won't lose its second place that easily. The next one would be average distance. These are actually two interesting extra indicators which don't necessarily correspond to the trade flows, but it's interesting when you're benchmarking things against each other. So we have the average distance of importing countries in kilometers. This means that we will never give you the exact distance of a certain country to another certain country, but it's a benchmarking tool. For example, if we look at the world's exports on average, importing countries, all importing countries are on average 5,491 kilometers away from their suppliers. If we go at a bilateral, at the country specific distances, we can see that China's importers of green tea are on average 6,000 kilometers away. So China provides not only regional green tea, but goes way beyond regional supply. Whereas, for example, Germany goes up until 1,000, maybe almost 2,000 kilometers on average. So it's a much closer average range than China. That's how you interpret this one. And then when I am, for example, an exporter of Japan, I can see I can check if my market is actually further away from my usual importing countries, or if it's closer. That's how you look into it. I think it's more interesting, this table, actually, when we're looking at the importer's view. So you can actually see if an importer is looking for a supplier, how far are my suppliers on average, and how far should I go for my product. Then we also have concentration of importing countries. This is actually an index which ranges from 0 to 1, and it's called the Herfindale Index. And it indicates if these exporters supply to a concentrated if their markets are concentrated or not. So if this number is between a 0 and a 0.1, it means that the importing countries are not concentrated at all, which means that they're exporting to many different countries. If this number is between 0.1 and 0.18, for example, China, this means that it's moderately concentrated. So it is still supplying quite a bit of different countries, but there's some concentration in a few. Most of its exports go to a few top countries. But when we go above 0.18, this means that these imports are very concentrated. So you can check this with Vietnam. It probably exports to a few very specific countries, and they might have most of their market share. I don't see anything below the 0.1. Yes, Sri Lanka, for example, is exporting to many different countries because it's not, its importing countries are not that concentrated. Okay, and let me look into the questions to see if you already have. I see 19 questions. Let me make it bigger. Thank you for so many questions. I like the interactivity. Is it possible to have data for 2 different HS codes consolidated together? Yes, this is actually possible, and I will show you this later, how you group products together. Our data has many different sources. It's mostly collected by ITC, but there is, if you're looking for the specific source of one country, you can always go to the tab at the top where you find sources, and then you can look into the more specific sources for this specific data. Also, it's important, let me make this smaller again, to look into, if you see little eyes, you can find extra information. So also next to the countries, you find little eyes, and you can find, most of the time it includes the sources. So for example, here you can find more information on the reporting and the compilation on the UN Comtrade site. So I invite you to click on the information that is that you are looking for there. Have you said, I said that if a code starts with a 0, then it means that they are raw. No, that is not, I said something similar, but I meant that the product codes are ranked according to how complicated they are. So manufacturing will be a much higher code than a raw material. So I think 01 is live animals, for example. And then everything that starts with a 0 are still agricultural products, but I would have to look at the ranking specifically to see when cocoa beans are becoming, yeah, no, it's not that simple. You have to, they are ranked in a way that the more complicated products are a higher code, but if they start with a 0, it does not mean necessarily that they are raw. I'm sorry if that confused. Exactly. Incoterms FOB for exports and CIF for imports. That's actually a very good question. There are some inconsistencies between the reported exports versus reported imports. And there can be many reasons for these differences, because it's also recorded by different countries most of the time. So taking into account that exports are recorded as a freight on board term of the Incoterms, and imports are recorded costs in freight, which means that one side doesn't take into account, for example, transportation costs. So there might be inconsistencies when one country is reporting the same transaction as the other country. And this is something that we cannot we cannot account for. So it is important when you're looking at these values that there might be some inconsistencies there, and then you need to know why they are. And sometimes this can be due to also due to differently recording certain products. There's many reasons why sometimes these numbers can be slightly different. Okay. How to link data from different revisions. I am drawing on my screen. If you want to look in the different revisions, you go to the reference material, you go to the harmonized system correspondences. Let's do it here. Okay, it automatically filled out the green tea, and we can see that over time, nothing happened to my green tea. But we can, for example, look into cherries. I think fresh cherries. Yes, perfect. We have a good example here. For fresh cherries in the 2012 revision changed to two separate product codes. You have fresh sour cherries suddenly, and you have fresh cherries excluding sour cherries. And before they were corresponded together, they were classified together. So these things can happen. But for example, before 2012, I think, there was no code for smartphones, for example. Sometimes there's just new types of products that come up, and they didn't exist before, and new product codes needs to be created. So in that case, there's some just newly added codes there. I hope that's clear. Let me look into a few of your other questions. How to explain the large difference between unit value for the same product from one country to another. It's like I said, there's many different types of product underneath these codes, and each country has different products that they prioritize, have different types of packaging, quality. There's so many different reasons. So this unit value is just an average of many different products that are underneath. It's an average over time as well. So you would have to do more research into what is, for example, between Vietnam and Japan, why Japan has like a very specific or a very unique type of green tea, for example, that Vietnam cannot supply. There's many different reasons. So many questions. I'm very happy with this. Can we draw a country's imports and exports of a product together? I'm not sure what that means. If you can rewrite it, or if you can email us about this, please let me know, because I'm not sure how to answer that question. The distance is supposed to be between the capitals, yes, if I am not mistaken. The most informative data regarding the green tea would be to see what is the volume of multinationals. We don't show we don't have the data on a company level. So that is something that is protected and we cannot share. We don't have it either. So it's not something that we can make publicly available. Are the exports listed here net exports, or do they include re-exported goods? They do include re-exported goods because a trade map doesn't make any difference between the two. It's also, if the country doesn't report it, we cannot know which part would be re-exports. If the country does report it, we also show it. So for example, let me go back to my table. If there are re-exports for a certain country, you will see here in the other criteria. It will be exports, imports, and re-exports. So for example, China will have data like this. Okay. Let me continue at this point, and I will continue later with the question section. So this is how this table can be interpreted. And now we were looking at the exporters view of green tea, but I am actually interested in Japan. So I click on Japan and automatically it will be filled out here in the top box of all your selected data. I want to look at the exports of Japan. I still want to look into trade indicators by country, and I want to look at direct data. I told you before about the mirror data, so you can always choose mirror data to see what are reporting its partners, but in this case, Japan delivers very qualitative data, so I'll leave it like this. I read the top title, list of importing markets of the products exported by Japan in 2019. So now we are receiving a list of importers of green tea by Japan. And it gives you a little summary of what Japan does in the green tea market. So Japan's exports represent 6.2% of the world exports for this product. So it's not, as we saw before, it's China, obviously, who is the biggest exporter of green tea, and Japan had third place with fourth place with 6.2% of world exports. I know its ranking in world's export is third, exactly. So the average distance of importing countries from Japan of green tea is 7,581 kilometers, as we saw before in the previous table as well. And the export concentration is 0.23. So we said that everything above 0.18 is highly concentrated. So we will see that it exports mostly to a few large importers. And here we see a similar table again, but with some extra trade indicators. Sorry. With some extra trade indicators. But the idea behind it is the same. So we see the list of importers, and they are ranked according to how big of importers from Japan that they are. So the US is the largest importer of Japanese green tea. Chinese Taipei is the second largest, Germany third, Singapore, Indonesia, etc. But when we see and when we look at the value actually exported from Japan, we see that the US has most of the shares of Japanese green tea. And here you see a new column, actually, share in Japan's exports, and we can see that the US holds 42.7% of Japanese green tea exports. Chinese Taipei has 16.3, Germany 11.2, etc. So we can see that this is quite a concentrated market. Here we see again the quantity exported in 2019. We can see the unit is tons as well. We can see the unit value. And yeah, exactly. We can see that the high unit value seems to be in the United States, maybe because there's like some niche product that the US is buying from Japan and willing to pay a lot for. Yeah, we cannot say anything about that, but for example, Chinese Taipei might be buying a very different type of green tea than the US. Here we see the growth in value between 2015 and 2019. We see the growth in quantity in those 5 years, and we see again the growth in value on the shorter term. And we see that these numbers are the numbers we saw in the previous table as well. We can see that Japan exports of green tea grew by 19% on average in those 5 years. They also grew on 18% in quantity. So the unit value stays very stable over those years. Like there's not a big difference between those two values, which is interesting. Like we can say that it's a very stable price you'll be getting for Japanese green tea. However, we see that the value in the growth in value between 2018 and 2019 has gone down a little bit. The growth has gone down a little bit, so it's growing still very steadily at 7%, even though in the last 5 years on average it was 19%. So it's growing a little slower, but the market is still, the country is doing still very well. We can see that most of its target markets are also just growing very well. For example, Italy is growing at 89% in value, 60 in quantity, and 45, even though also lower, still 45 in the last 2 years. So it's there's many big importers which are actually doing very well, where Japan's green tea is doing very well. Then the next column is ranking of partner countries in the world imports, and this is also an interesting one, but because it shows you how large their global imports of green tea are. So the US was the second largest importer in the world of green tea. So it's also an important market for Japan, but also an important green tea market in general. Chinese Taipei is the 6th largest importer of green tea. Germany is the 3rd largest importer of green tea. So Japan is already targeting very big green tea markets. Then we see that Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, they're all like more smaller markets in the global market. So they're the 20th largest importer of green tea. So what I want to say here is that if you're looking for interesting markets to target, you don't always have to go for the largest markets. These markets are all growing quite well. Specifically, Indonesia is growing very well, and much higher than Japan's overall exports growth. Italy is growing exponentially as well. So even though they are not the biggest importers of green tea, these could actually be more interesting than world's largest markets. It's always important to look into what is the bilateral relationship between these countries and my country as well. Here we can see the share of partner countries in world imports. So it's related to the ranking of partner countries. So number 2, United States has a share of 9.8% in world imports of green tea. So these two are related. That's how you interpret them. You see here the total imports growth in value of partner countries between 2015 and 2019. This is also interesting to benchmark because, for example, the US, again, we see that its total import growth of green tea from the world is 5%, but from Japan, it's 22%. So we are gaining market share in the United States because we are growing much faster than the US overall is importing green tea. So that's how you can link those two columns. For example, here, Germany, we were saying it was maybe not the most interesting market at this point, but it was growing. Its imports are growing. Sorry, Germany was not the biggest exporter of green tea. But here we see that Germany is not growing very fast its imports from Japan as Japan's overall exports are doing. But here we can see that Germany's imports from the world are actually declining. So Japan is doing better to Germany than the overall exporters to Germany. But then again, it might not be the most volatile market, the most dynamic market, as it is declining, and the world green tea market is, in general, is doing very well. So Germany might not be the best choice, again, if you don't have a foot in this market yet. Here we see the average distance between partner countries and all their supplying markets. So in this case, it is actually turned around. So the average distances we see here now are the distances from these importers to, on average, to all its suppliers. So the US imports green tea on average of countries that are 11,000 kilometers away. Chinese Taipei imports green tea from countries that are on average 2,000 kilometers away. So this means the opposite of the previous table we saw, but it's the same idea. So it's actually interesting to see if Japan is closer, because we want to export from Japan our green tea. Is Japan closer than the average supplier to the US? Here we see the concentration of all supplying countries to these markets. So this is also turned around in this case. So we can see this code can tell us if a lot of different countries are supplying these importers, or if it's, for example, just one big exporter of green tea is targeting the US. And that seems to be the case. And I suspect it's China, because it's the largest exporter of green tea, as we saw before. We see that 0.27 is higher than 0.18. So we can say that this is also a concentrated supply of green tea to the US. This is even higher. So Chinese Taipei will probably be supplied by maybe even one or two main countries. Here we see already a glimpse of another tool. Actually, this column is the average tariff faced by Japan in these markets. And these numbers are direct links to Market Access Map, which is the tool that we will see in a little bit. So I won't talk too much about this, but it's pretty self-explanatory. For example, in the US, on average, Japan's green tea would face a 3.2% tariff. But as I said before as well, tariffs are levied on a country-specific code, not on the HS6 code, which we are looking at right now in this table. So a 3.2% on average could be one product that is facing 9% and another product 0%, and then another product 0%. So this you would need to go into the other tool to actually see what is happening to our product in this market, in the US market, or in the, in any of these markets. For example, Thailand on average is levying 90% to Japanese green tea. So I suspect there is one type of green tea, which is, or a few types of green tea, which does not face this type of tariffs. Let me look at something else. You want to look at the more raw data, as I said before. We can look into time series, and you can also get to the time series straight from here. So we look at the yearly ones, for example, and we can see per year what has been exported by Japan to these markets. So I can change how many columns I want to see, and we can go up to 20 per page. And you can actually see here the list of top importers of green tea from Japan. If you click on the top, you can see, I want to see if the list was similar in 2013. You can click on 2013 and the list will rank itself to the values of 2013. So you see that the US is still the largest importer. Germany is the second one, but Singapore has come up and Chinese Taipei has gone down. So there has been some changes over time, and we can literally go back up until 2001 if we are sure that our harmonized system code of our product already existed in 2001. This is also an important reason why you would need to know what happened over time with your product code, because sometimes there will just be no trade recorded before 2007, and then you know that this product code just didn't exist before that. But yeah, that's what you can do with this table. I do like to look into graphs for a time series because it visually tells you what happened. Here you can see the top 5 importers of Japanese green tea. Let me look at which country. We're looking at 2001 to 2020 in this case. You can play around a little bit, like you can also look at the bar chart, but depending on what your measures are here at the top, you can play around with different types of graphs. Well, now we're here at the graphs side anyway. I want to also show you the monthly time series, because monthly time series can actually show you if there are specific months that are more important for this product. Like this product is exported more in a specific month, maybe with harvest season. Toys are exported more in holiday seasons. Yeah, it's important to know when in a year you can actually, when you can actually export. So here you can see that in the month of October, there was a big peak of imports from the US. And in September and December in 2019. So I'm not sure if I'm seeing any patterns here. Maybe not. I can go back to 2018 to see if it was similar during that year. And we can see that this peak in 2020 does not show up for the year before that. There are some peaks, but I don't see any seasonality in this data. But it could still be interesting. It's also very different across different importers. So in this case, I'm not seeing any seasonality, but for example, if you look into a specific region, for example, exporting asparagus to the European market, you can see that the European market can easily supply itself around April, May, June. So if you are an international exporter of asparagus, that might not be the right time to target these markets with your asparagus as well. Whereas in the winter months, the European market is more supplied by Peru and Mexico, so they take over this this market share when the European countries cannot supply themselves. So it shows up in these seasonal time series. You can also look into maps. I'm not sure which map will show up at this point. So we see the importing markets for our green tea from Japan in the month that we have selected. So maybe let's go back to trade indicators to see for the latest year available. Yes, so we have the list of importing markets for a product exported by Japan in 2019. And we can see that yellow means that the market share is between 20 and 50%. And as we saw in our table, the same thing, the US was kept the largest market share for our Japanese tea. So you can play around with these things. You can add some second trade indicators by share of partner countries in world imports, in Japan's exports in general. This is also very interesting to look at. I realize that I don't have much time for this tool anymore, so I will go back to my table. And I also want to show one other view, which is looking at your competition. So for example, I am interested, as a Japanese exporter of green tea, I'm interested in Indonesia as a market. I can click on Indonesia and you can see that Indonesia appears here at the top. Japan has disappeared. And now the table shows you all the exporters of green tea to the Indonesian market. And we can see that our Japan is already the second largest exporter of green tea to this market, but Vietnam is the largest one with 38.4% of market share in the Indonesian market. So you can look a little bit into which countries are your competition in these markets if you decide that could be an interesting path for you to follow. And then we can see that, for example, Vietnam is its exports to Indonesia are declining on average over the last 5 years, whereas we are actually growing very steadily. So this is a very good sign that there is a very big preference over Japanese green tea in the Indonesian market. Also China, which actually was the largest exporter of green tea, is behind us, is also growing well, but only has 13.5% in this market. So Japan is doing quite well already in the Indonesian market, even though it was not the largest market. It could be an interesting choice to target. Let me show you how to create the product groups and the country groups, because a few people have asked me that. And then I will continue to show you the companies list, because I think that's also quite interesting. And then I will go back to the questions. So please bear with me. Here, next to your account, you can actually manage my country groups and product groups. So you see here, product group, country group, partner group. You can find a list of predefined product groups already. I think I created these ones myself 4 years ago. This is a list of ICT goods because I was interested in analyzing what happened in the global market for ICT products. So this is the one that I created, but it's not always as easy to find every single product that belongs to this group. So it's quite a big adventure to do this, but it could be worth it if you're really interested in these type of products. Here is an example of how you create the country group. So I want to create neighbors Belgium. I create the name. I can start adding my neighboring countries, which is France, Germany, the Netherlands. Where are they? So you can add them one by one, but you can also look into already created country groups. So if you want to add different groups together, I can add the cotton fort to my neighbors as well. And you can see also standard country groups. So for example, if you want to look at the European Union, you click on EU 27 at this point, if you want to group them together and look into this data. And the same thing is for product groups. But as I said, if you want to look at all agricultural products, it might take you a while to create them. But yeah, it can be very interesting as well. If I want to look at company data, I want to go back to home and search to make sure I'm not getting any bugs there. I want to look into the Indonesia as an importer of green tea because I'm still a Japanese exporter. So I want to look into Indonesia and look if there are companies that are importing this product. So we don't have the trade data on these companies, but we do have a starting point of contacts. So for example, these company groups, they don't mean that much. They are just sorted per type of company that they are, but they all have indicated that they import green tea as their business. So you can make sure that most of them are still interesting first contact. So for example, here you see the information that is available for this one. We only have a phone number. But if the website has been provided, these ones are all quite limited in information, but yeah, we show you all the information that we get from our partners. So for example, this information comes from Dun & Bradstreet, but we also have some connections with Compass. Yeah, so it depends. You always find the sources of the table you're looking at here at the bottom. Okay, I think I have covered most of the information on TradeMap. Let me take a look at the questions. But if you have a question, you can always email our generic email address, which is marketanalysis@intrasend.org. Okay, let me go. Is it possible to set up the longer retrospective when analyzing the data? This is not possible to do that automatically in the system, but if you have an account, you can download this data and you can do any analysis you want on the raw data yourself. So you can look at growth over a 10-year time. Nothing keeps you from doing these analysis yourself, but yeah, automatically we cannot provide that. Can we have access to the recorded video? Yes, I will send you the link to the video so you can take your time and take everything next to you while you are trying out TradeMap. Okay, so I will start now. Sorry, I'm still reading. I will start now about my presentation on market access map. Okay, thank you for all your interactivity. It's great to see you all answering. So this is Trade Map. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let us know. We're there for you. Because now I'll be going to Market Access Map, and you can access it with the same account as the one you created in the portal, or if you have created it in Trade Map itself, it works in both tools. And this one gives you information on how to enter a certain market. So what tariffs do you have to pay for your product? What are the non-tariff measures that you have to comply with to be able to enter into this market? Are there any preferential treatments you can take advantage of when you're entering this market? And what are the rules that are applied to this trade agreement that you want to take advantage of? So this is the homepage as well. I will go quickly over the top. It's less exhaustive as the trade map one, but here we have home. We can always go back to home. We have a tab which is called access, and I will not go over this one specifically right now because it goes into more detail, everything else that we will see. So you can, if you are only interested in customs tariffs, you can go to very specific information on the customs tariffs. If you want to have some information on trade remedies, you can go in there. Or if you want very detailed information, but actually the information you will already see in the first page anyway. So I will also not go over this, but this is where you find all the information on non-tariff measures and export and import requirements. This one I really like because it allows you to compare market access conditions across different markets or for different competitors. So if I am a Japanese exporter of green tea, I want to see what are my treatments in different markets. I go to this page. If I am a Japanese exporter and I want to see what are the treatments my competitors get in a market that I already chose, I want to go to this one. And if I'm a Japanese exporter and I just want to see which products that are in my product portfolio that have actually very good treatments in a specific market, we can look into which different products get which tariffs. So we also have a part with where we can analyze different trade agreements. So I will go into the trade agreement section, but if you're interested in GTAP tariffs, like I let you play around with it, and if you have some questions, you can definitely let us know. And the download section, this is important to make sure that you have your registered account, because then you can actually download your results. We have a page on COVID as well, which we never took into account non-tariff measures that were temporary before, unless they were trade remedies. But considering COVID and our mandate to offer small and medium enterprises the information that they need to be able to export their products, and due to COVID, there were so many measures being taken, like export restrictions, some tariffs that were added, some liberalizations to normal tariffs, which people needed to be aware of. We created a separate page where you can have the overview of the active measures of the history of the measures being taken. So it's a very interesting page to look into if you have products that are related to COVID or just protective products, etc. So Here you also have a data availability part. You can look into the methodology, how we calculated certain things. If you have some questions on how, where something came from, we have our resources. You have a little glossary, which is also very interesting. If you have some questions on the words that were being used, you have frequently asked questions, which also can answer a lot of questions already. It also has the harmonized system product search built in, but normally when you enter into market access map, you would already know your product code from your trade map searches. If I never go to market access map without my code, so it's a similar system as well. If you're interested in the Incoterms that we talked about before, the freight on board or the cost in freight Incoterms, then you can find some more information on that here. And here you can log into your account. I'm already logged in, so I will just start with my search. So our exporting country was Japan. Our destination country, I was looking at Indonesia. And our product was green tea. And it was exceeding, 20, exceeding 3 kilos. So on this page, this is an overview page because it's a home page. So it gives you an overview of everything, all the information that is in a market access map, actually. So the first things first, it gives you already the product national tariff line code. So this is an example of a code that has more than 6 digits. So this is always related to the destination country. This is the definition of Indonesia for green tea. And Indonesia makes a differentiation between green tea leaves or other, and it gives a different code to it. So it's important for you to know, okay, these are definitions of Indonesia. I'm a Japanese exporter of green tea leaves, so I can export under the conditions for this code. So we're there, and we can see that first thing we get is the customs tariffs that Indonesia applies to Indonesia applies to Japanese green tea leaves. And we can see here, this box is everything about the customs tariffs. So we can see that there's different treatments for Japanese green tea. I will start by explaining to you what the MFN duties are. These are the most favored nations duties. So this is a commitment that a country makes to the World Trade Organization to not ask, to give everyone from all member states from the World Trade Organizations the same treatment. So if you see an MFN duty there, it means that all World Trade Organization member states get an applied tariff of 5% and not higher. So in this case, the MFN duties are 5%. Then you see that there is a preferential tariff for Japan. So the only reason why a country can give a better treatment than these MFN duties that they actually committed to at the WTO, the only reason they can do this is if they have a free trade agreement, a legally binding agreement with partner countries. So there are 2 agreements available of which Japan could take advantage of to not have to pay the 5% applied tariff. But as I mentioned before, these preferential tariffs always come with conditions. So let's look into more details so it becomes clear. Here we see that there is a preferential tariff for Japan under the ASEAN agreement. And here you can see some more information, which other countries are part of this agreement. And then you see that there are rules of origin. So to be able to take advantage of this 0%, you need to be able to prove that your product is actually originating from Japan. So you need to read very carefully what are the rules to prove that your product is from your origin. And then you need to take care of the certificate of origin. You need to comply and certify your products. So it comes with a whole process, but all the information all the information that is available should be here in the rules of origin, certificate of origin section for these trade agreements. And then if we open this one, we see that this is another agreement. So it is a bilateral agreement between Indonesia and Japan. You see when it got into force, etc. And you see that it's only the two of them. So the member states that can take advantage of them are only these two. And this agreement has its own rules of origins and its own certificates of origin. So in this case, you would need to figure out what you would actually need to do to comply with these rules of origin in both the cases and select the trade agreement that would work best for you. What is the easiest to comply with, maybe? When you click on find out more, you go to another tool, another market analysis tool, which is we're not gonna discuss today, but it actually shows you all the different free trade agreements, their conditions, and you can compare these free trade agreements and their conditions as well. And it gives you much more detailed information on rules of origin. The tool is called Rules of Origin Facilitator. So if you want to look more into that, you can click on find out more and you are redirected automatically to this page. So that is what this means. You also see that there's an applied tariff, and the ad valorem equivalent is the AVE of this tariff, because what we do in market access map is if the applied tariff, they're not always percentages. Sometimes tariffs can be levied on, you pay, for example, $5 on per 100 kilograms of meat. You pay a tariff rate quota, for example, which as long as a certain amount of imports hasn't happened, you pay 0%, but once you export more than a certain amount, you pay another type of percentage. So we calculated for ease of understanding into an ad valorem equivalent in case there are different types of tariffs. But in this case, it will stay the same because the MFN duties as well as the preferential duty are already in a percentage. So the ad valorem equivalent is just repeated there. But I hope this is clear for everyone. So let me close these extra tabs like that. So you see that for this product, there are no trade remedies applied by Indonesia to Japan. And here you see the regulatory requirements, or what we call the non-tariff measures as well, that Indonesia puts on Japanese green tea. And here we see the list, so we can open them and we can see the title, we see a little summary, we see which authority is actually asking this, and you can find the links to documents and websites in case you need more information on how to get this certification ready. In this case, most of these non-tariff measures are related to safety. For example, inspection requirement. You can see that there is, this is a safety measure for certain organisms to enter into the country. So you need to make sure that you're aware of the quarantine requirements of your product, inspections, and the certifications that all goes with it. So yeah, we list that here, and you can find the links to the sources if they are available. So this is our homepage. So it gives you already a big overview of all the information that you can find here in Market Access Map. And as I said, you can find more detailed information on these 3 topics here in the Access tab. So I'll start to go into the Compare tab because I think this is more important, more interesting for you now, because it has a lot of functionalities. So we want to compare markets because we are a Japanese exporter of green tea. So I'm exporting from Japan to all destination countries for green tea. And we want it to be more than 3 kilos. So voila, we go there. And you'll see that it doesn't propose you any national tariff lines, no more detailed codes, because we're comparing again internationally. So we stay at the 6-digit level in this case. So all the tariffs you will see are average tariffs of all the underlying codes for this 6-digit code. Automatically, it ranks here alphabetically, but I think it could be more interesting to look into the import value in 2019, to look into actual importers of green tea from Japan. And we see that this is the same list as in TradeMap before. So this is this column is linked to the TradeMap column on imported value in 2019. It's also in $1,000 US, by the way. So it's important to keep in mind. And you can see here the US is the top importer of Japanese green tea. We can see that there is a 3.20% MFN tariffs. We can see that the effectively applied tariffs. So effectively applied tariffs mean that if there is a preferential treatment that Japan can have in these markets, it will show under the effectively applied tariffs, because this shows you the lowest possible tariff rate. So MFN, most favored nations, is their commitment to the WTO members. And this is the favorable treatment if applied. And you can see for Indonesia, MFN was 5% and the effectively applied was 0%. So Japan has a 5% of preferential margin in the Indonesian market. Here, this is also an important one because you can see how many codes are under this HS6 code. So in the US, there are 2 codes. So I feel that one of the codes will have a percentage here. Yeah, so these are actually just the average of these 2 codes. So we would have to look at the bilateral situation between Japan and the US to know what are the underlying codes the US has defined and what tariffs they are levying on the different codes. You can see the last revision that they used, which is mostly 2017. But you can see that there's also still definitions for 2012, but our code didn't change, so this is fine. And we can see that actually Germany, Singapore, Indonesia, Canada, France, they're all levying a very low, effectively applied tariff. We can also look at the chart for this, just to see, to rank them according to their applied tariffs or to some other things. You can download them, you can save them, you can look into whichever country you want to look at, so you can play around with this as well. And this has a similar logic when we look into competitors. So we want to see how other exporting countries do in the Indonesian market. So we go to destination country, Indonesia, green tea, more than 33 kilos, and we search. And in this case, we will see again the national tariff lines. No, we cannot see the national tariff lines here, but it shows you how many are below it. So we can look at the top exporters of green tea to Indonesia, and we are the second one. And as we can see, there is a lot of others who can actually take advantage of this ASEAN agreement. So we are not alone. But for example, Chinese Taipei does not seem to show the option of a better treatment. So overall, regional options are very good there. You can also add some things if you want to look at how many non-tariff measures are in these are levied in these exporters. But in this case, it's not that interesting because non-tariff measures do not change per exporter. But for example, the preferential trade agreement is an interesting one. So you can see that Vietnam also has two preferential treatments it can take advantage of, Japan, which is us. But China only has one. So I assume it's ASEAN. But yeah, you can play around with that as well. And you can search for a specific country. If I want to look at Belgium, I can see that Belgium pays 5% in Indonesia. I think I'll take some questions now because I feel like we have gone over our time a little bit. I'm sorry, some people had to leave. I'm really sorry about the technical issues. Thank you very much. If someone has a specific question, separate webinars on the remaining tools. Is it possible we could have access to bulk data? I will send you definitely the recording. Is it possible to classify the type? Thank you very much for your collaboration and your interactivity. I'm enjoying this a lot. I will continue with expert potential map. I will continue with expert potential map. I see some questions about my email. You can always reach me through the email that you have received normally when you registered for this webinar, but I will also send you the recording, so no worries, you will have my email anyway. I will continue with the expert potential map for the people who want to stay, and you can always rewatch the recording if you are interested in potential markets or products. Thank you very much. So we go to expert potential map through visit expert potential map in our MAT portal, market analysis tools portal. And this is our screen. So we have a similar setup as before. We have some tabs, and the first one is the home tab. So we can always go back if we're lost in the tool, because it also has a lot of information. So sometimes it happens to get lost. We can get to the home page here. We have a product view, a market view, and an exporter's view. So what expert potential map actually does is it calculates for you using many different variables. It calculates for you where there is export potential for products from your country, where there is potential for which markets show a lot of potential for your product, or which exporters have a lot of potential for a product you are looking into importing, for example. So this is based on a lot of different variables. So if you have any specific questions on some data, we would need to look into the data specifically, but this tool gives you a very fun and easy to use idea of where there is potential, how much potential has already been realized, is there some potential we're not taking advantage of yet. It's a very easy to play with tool. So let's dive into it. Sorry, I still want to show you that there is also a research resources button. And if you have some questions on the data sources or correspondence tables, because there are some pre-assigned groups, product groups, for example, and you can find country groups as well. You can find which countries or products belong to which group. You have a glossary as well, a very interesting frequently asked questions as well, which gives you a lot of information. And as I mentioned, we have tutorials on our YouTube account. And we also do some publications on very specific topics like employment impacts associated with expert potential, but many different publications related to this data. And you can find the other ITC tools through this button. So yes, let's dive into it now, because I want to look at the expert potential for Japan. So I click on Japan. Sorry, I'm going maybe a little bit too fast. As you can see, here you have a list of products, subsectors and sectors, and you have countries, subregions and regions. So automatically, when I type Japan, it fills it out automatically and I find it very easily. But for example, if you're looking for a region, let's say Europe, it will show up in subregions and in the region. So you have to click on the tab. Like, you have to be aware of the fact that you're looking for a group and not just one single country. So I was looking at Japan. So I'm looking at a country and I look at Japan as an exporter. So I leave this one highlighted. And automatically you can see how much untapped export potential this country leaves. So according to our calculations, there is an untapped export potential of 372.2 billion US dollars. So this is a projection of how much Japan could additionally export in the next 5 years if many barriers to trade were to be tackled. For example, if non-tariff measures that were redundant would be removed, if trade relationships improve. So it is not always as easy to remove these barriers, but it is an indicator that if certain things that are keeping this country from realizing this potential are being removed, there is a lot of space for improvement. So it is a theoretical model, but it does show you a very good idea of what is possible. So I just want to show you how the tool works. So let's start with explore products, because it gives you like a nice overview of the products with the most potential for Japan. So you have different ways of looking at this information. You can look at the tree map like this, or we have a gap chart. Here we can see that. So we see, for example, the motor vehicles for transport of persons shows probably the largest amount of export potential for Japan. And the light color, light blue, so I click on it to fixate this little box here to look more into detail what are the values that we're looking at. The light blue shows you the potential that has not been taken advantage of. The dark blue are the actual exports that already take place. So this is also linked to the trade map portal. And for example, for motor vehicles for the transport of persons, we can see that there is a double X. This is because it takes a few different HS, so 6-digit product codes together to be able to say motor vehicles for the transport of persons. So if you go to the correspondence table for this product code, you can find out which products are below this code. So we see that there is an overall export potential of $112.6 billion, but the actual exports at this point was $102.7 billion. And that leaves a remaining untapped potential of $18.1 billion. So the interesting thing is that this untapped potential already includes some projections of related to the COVID pandemic. We try to take into account certain important events to be calculated in to provide for this. Also, as you can see, the export potential is not the simple adding actual exports and untapped potential together, because there's many different, to start with, there's many different products underneath this product code. And it is possible for certain products to exceed their export potential. We will see another example of this later. But in this case, the export potential is a sum of all the different products, and if a product is already exceeding its export potential, it will not take into account a negative number, or it will not take into account something that is below zero. So in that case, there might be some discrepancies because negative numbers are not calculated in. So this is all ranked, or how do you say, clustered according to the sector that these products are in. So it's harder to see in this view to see what is the product with most export potential, but you can see which sector is actually showing a lot of promise. And the sectors are also listed here. So you can choose automatically, it shows you the top 50 products, but automatically you can choose some other products if you're not interested in aircrafts and boats, for example. So you can see per product, per sector. If you open the sectors, you can even go more into detail. You can see the products, but you can also look into subsectors. So it just gives you the overview of which sector shows you the most promise as well. Let me go to the gap chart, because personally I like this one better because it shows me more clearly where lies the most export potential. So you can see again that motor vehicles are the largest for Japan. Then smart cards, other machineries, parts and accessories, motor vehicles, etc. So it is ranked according to the export potential at this point. If you go down, you can see that the little blocks are the ones that show export potential. So like the little blue bar here is the export potential. The brown little bar here is the export potential. The white rounds thingies are the circles are the actual exports. So the line in between these two is the potential that has not been realized yet. So it's also possible to actually rank them differently according to the untapped export potential. And then you see everything moving a little bit, as we can see that this line is much longer. And this one actually shows an untapped potential of 43.5 billion US dollars. Whereas motor vehicles untapped export potential, sorry, it's popping up and down, it only shows 18.1 billion, which is also still a lot of potential revenue, but you can see that it is a different way of reasoning. You can also look more into detail when you look in analyze export potential, because this gives you a ranking according to export potential in general, but you can rank them. If you scroll down, you can rank them according to demand for this product in the world market. So the ranking number stays the same, but the ranking starts here, and they all get a different spot according to the demand for this product in the world market and the share of demand in their export potential calculations. So as you can see here, demand is about the circles. So you can see that smart cards has the largest circle and is the first one in row. You see the motor vehicles are second, parts of telephone sets, etc. So if you want to look at supply, what the potential Japan can supply for these products, you can see that this ranks in a different way. And this is the supply side of the export potential for these products for Japan. So, and that's the length of this of these lines. So it's fun to play around with. It also automatically gives you the top 25, but you can also click here and there to see which products are more of interest to you as an exporter. So as I was already looking into Japanese green tea and potential markets, let's look into markets. So I go to the markets at the top for exporter Japan. And at this point, now we're looking at the export potential of Japan in general. So China leaves the most untapped potential for Japanese exports, and the US. Let's see if that's also the case for green tea, larger than 3 kilos. And this becomes a whole different story. Interesting to see is that a lot of countries that we saw in export in trade map, in our biggest importers, for example, of green tea from Japan, they are coming back. So the US was the biggest importer of Japanese green tea. And we can see the dotted line shows you that Japan already exceeded its projections of potential to the US. So this is a very positive thing, because there is very likely a very big preference for Japanese green tea in the United States of America, because it's doing so well that it is actually trespassing the projections of our calculations. So this means that the US is already a very good market for Japan green tea. The same comes for Chinese Taipei and Germany. So our exports are already doing very well. So we would have to look into why this is happening. Maybe because there is a very big preference, like I said before, and then these markets are very good choices to enter as an exporter. But it's also important to keep in mind that sometimes, for example, Germany's market seemed to be declining. So it would be, maybe the market was already saturated. That's why we already exceeded the export potential calculation. So maybe Germany is a less interesting market because it's declining its imports of green tea in general. Whereas the US was still growing very steadily, if I remember correctly. Interesting other country that we see here, Morocco. We hadn't seen it before. But if you go back to trade map, you can see that Morocco is one of the biggest importers in the world of green tea. But the actual exports, like this little circle here, indicates that that Japan is not exporting much to, there doesn't seem to be much actual exports happening to Morocco from Japan, even though it's a very big market for green tea. So most of the export potential is actually still untapped. So that's why this one is popping up, even though we haven't seen it as an actual importer of Japanese green tea yet. And Japan, China seems to be a very similar story to Morocco. So yeah, now they are ranked according to their export potential. So if we want to rank them according to their export potential gap, so we rank them according to their untapped potential, it seems that Morocco is actually a very promising market, even though we haven't entered it yet. So we would have to look into Morocco's trade relationships with Japan, see why this is not happening yet. I do love this tool as an idea. It gives you a new idea sometimes, like this Morocco story. So then we can go back to trade map and look into, does Japan already have good relationships with Morocco? Are there some contact details in the trade map available for Moroccan importers, etc.? So I think, yeah, this gives you a very good start. The same would go for exporters. So I will not spend too much time on this anymore because we already went over our time by a lot. But if you are interested in this, you can always go back to the video tutorials, which also gives you another example of this. I will look into the questions. I see that there are some questions in the chat. I see that a lot of different people had to leave as well. Yes, so I sometimes, are there little Ds after the XX, please? This often has to do with how the products are grouped. So you would have to go, let me go into the correspondence table. So you find your way there. Some other questions. Thank you so much for attending. I see that a lot of people have left, but okay. So if we go to the correspondence tables, we see a list of all the HS6 codes and the subsector names and sector names. So let me go and type motor vehicles. Motor vehicles. Let me go back to my homepage so I know which code we were looking at. For example, it was Japan. We were looking at products, and we wanted to look at this product code. Okay. So yeah, we fill out the code we want more information on. So we are at the correspondence tables. And you can see here that the product code has many different products underneath. So as I said, there's a lot of different products to this group. Because all these HS6 codes are motor vehicles for persons. They're just different sizes of, there's some small, this is including station wagons, excluding station wagons. There's sometimes very small differences why these have a separate HS6 code. But in this case, for the analysis, it was necessary to combine them. So yeah, you can always go back to what these codes actually mean there. It is very specific to a specific different product. Okay, Thank you so much. I think I will stop here and I will turn on my video camera. I will send the presentation, the recorded session by email. So you will definitely get my email. If you have any other questions, I can always answer them by email as well. I hope you can play around with the data yourself a little bit for the products you are interested in. And I hope to hear from all of you, and thank you for joining us. Bye.